Hi everyone, Jay here from Jade Productions, back with another video. This time we are looking at all of the Stormcast stuff that has thus far been revealed for the new Stormcast battletome for Age of Sigmar 3.0. We're starting with this latest article that community has put out. I hesitate to really call these articles, but I'm going to start with this one which was put out. This is the latest one, currently on the 23rd of August, so keep that in mind. By the time I put this out, they might even have another one out. So this is the roundup thus far at this point. Going through this article here is all about Griffs, which, if you're not familiar what Griffhounds are, they're half bird, half lion, half dog things. They're actually really cool. I quite like them. But in amongst this nonsense, we have some nuggets about what some of the changes going to look like to the army. So one of the first things they show us here is that the new chariots, the Stormstrike chariots, they have a rule that chariots have. You charge, you roll the number of dice equal to the unmodified charge roll. On a 4+, for each 4+, that unit suffers 1 mortal wound. Yeah, not bad. Sure. Since it looks like you have the ability to field multiples of these, if that is the case, then these are probably something that are better off brought in individual units, just like the Chaos Chariots, and pretty much serve an identical role as the Chaos Chariots, which are kind of a flanking unit that can go down the center. You can field them in large units, you probably shouldn't, and they're good overall to just kind of scatter in different directions, smashing into things, dealing some overall damage, getting some early game damage done for a relatively cheap cost, being relatively sturdy at the same time. We'll see what the rest of the Stormstrike chariot sort of looks like in comparison to other chariots later. Then we have the Vanguard Paladors on their Griff charges. So the Vanguard Paladors are originally a fantastic unit with a mixture between, they were kind of supposed to be a skirmish cavalry, but ended up feeling a lot more like a heavy cavalry overall, just with more ranged attacks. They could throw their spear, and they could, instead of doing a normal move, they could ride the winds etheric to move 66 inches. So right here we can see that their ride the winds etheric has immediately changed, that instead of making a normal move or retreat, you can say that the unit will ride the winds, and it simply is removed from the battlefield and placed back on the battlefield more than 1 inches from any terrain features and objectives, and more than 9 inches away from enemy units. So it's essentially, you can re-destripe them. You just, instead of having to move 66 and bother with that and potentially get a terrible roll, now it is literally, you just pick them up, put them down somewhere else. This immediately, in my mind, is a huge improvement. It's a far more reliability. It's a good thing for Vanguard Paladors to have. It's far more reliable for very obvious reasons. Now that when dice don't get involved, it's far more reliable, which means you'll be able to put these guys where you need to, and there's nothing in here that says they can't still charge afterwards, so you'll still be able to do that, giving you a nice, decent, hopefully they work more like a skirmish cav, but if they keep some of their heavier cav rules, which was mostly done courtesy of the claws that they had on the Griff charges themselves, sorry if I sound a bit nasally, I'm a bit blocked up. This can allow them to do some pretty decent hard-hitting charges. So this is good. This is more mobility. This is excellent control over the board, which is what you want in typical games. Much more in 2.0. A little hard to say in 3.0 currently. But most of it seems pretty much the same. You want that nice board control that this offers you. In 2.0, for those not aware, the Stormcast were one of the first books, and they were one of the worst books even when they were released. So there's that. So this is a good improvement that I like. And we'll let you play to the objectives much more in here. Then we have the standard Griffhounds. So these are like the Griffhounds that go with some of your archers and can go with some other units and sort up with stuff. So this is another thing that Griffhounds used to have. If an enemy reserve unit or summoned unit is set up on the battlefield for the first time, I like that it specifies summoned and reserve. This used to be something completely different. I can't remember exactly what. You can pick up to 3 friendly Stormcast Eternals units wholly within 12 inches of this unit, so the Gryph-hound, to shoot. Any shooting attack made by the Stormcast Eternals unit picked with this ability must target that reserve unit or summon unit, which, had to have come in 12 inches from the Gryph-hound itself. So this is a fairly decent bubble, and this is for the people who just love to say that Stormcast are just Space Marines. Well, this rule is literally just ripped straight out of the Space Marines Codex for 9th and 8th edition. You get to shoot at something coming in from Deep Strike as a reactionary attack, but instead of being a dumbass stratagem, that you now have to pay to get your own dumb abilities, it's here baked into the warning cry. It'll be very good, I think. Certainly it has its role here, at least, as it basically blocks off entire areas. It does only apply when they're set up on the battlefield for the first time, which means people using abilities such as this Ride the Winds don't actually qualify for using this Warning Cry ability. There have to be things brought in from things such as the Harpies on the Daughters of Cain, the Kennerai, coming in from reserve during their first time. It has to be something like Beastmen Ambush, Beastmen coming in from their reserves at the start of the first battle round or second battle round, if they're Shadow Mains. It has to be Nighthaunt rising from the underworld for the first time, or it has to be undead units rising up or resurrecting from grave sites, or coming in from the flanks if they're Legion of Night. It can't be stuff that is already on the board and is teleporting around. That is not a qualifier for this warning cry, so that is an important thing to note. Now, the question of how many things do that, I honestly can't think of too many things that do that. There's a few teleporting shenanigans, but the most important one that I think of that this does not affect is the Caradron Overlords, because you can start them on the board, and they are already set up on the battlefield. Then they leave the battlefield with Fly High, and then they come back down somewhere else. They were already on the battlefield. It is not their first time being set up, so they do not qualify for this warning cry, which is a good little thing, because if they could, you'd have the Caradron's rule be completely useless, especially since it's their only form of mobility, since everything else is particularly slow. Even the ships are not the fastest without that ability. Then we have the Gryph-hounds here. We have the darting attack, and this has seen a minor change up. Before it used to be they can retreat like D6 inches. It's relatively the same in theory. Now you just retreat 6 inches after the Gryph-hounds have resolved all of their attacks, which hey, I like it. What can I say? I like hit and run attacks. I like Eldar. Just sue me. I play Caradrons. I like hit and run. But no, this is a solid staple. Roughly the same in terms of what its intention was to be, but again, overall, more reliable. So there is that. The rest of this article is just pure crap that we don't particularly care about, except for this lovely little art shot right here. So, next thing we go is we have this one. This is the oldest one that they showed off on the 29th of July, which talks about some of the things coming to the battletome. Now, I've talked about this in a previous video, so you can just skip ahead to the next article if you really want. But these are just things that are coming in to the new battletome, which are things that already exist for the Stormcasts. They're available as part of the Broken Realms supplements, and this is just them saying that those are going to be folded into the main book when it's reprinted now. So they're, yeah. What did you expect? The things from the Broken Realm supplements, just like they did with 40k, are going to be baked into the next book, because those things were there as stopgaps to help out these armies. I think there was meant to be a longer sort of time period between the end of Broken Realms and 3rd edition, but here we are. So Mortal Auxiliaries. So if you choose to play a Stormkeep, which changes up your allegiance abilities slightly differently, you get the battle trait that is Mortal Auxiliaries, where 1 in every 4 units can be a coalition units from the Cities of Sigmar faction. Now, the Cities of Sigmar has some amazing units that are fantastic. In addition, add 1 to the bravery characteristic of friendly Stormkeep units wholly within 12 inches of friendly Stormkeep Redeemers. That's mostly just Liberators and a few other Paladins, couple of things here. The Redeemer keyword's a little bit more widespread, sort of. But the City of Sigmar units, they gain the Stormkeep keyword. Now, they're coalition units, which as far as my understanding, means they can be battle line. So, you can mess around with this very nicely. I love this way of bringing in allies. I've never talked about it in any videos, but it's fantastic. And it was better beforehand, provided, and this is on the assumption, that the Stormcast are shit when they're released. Quite honestly, if the previously, the Cities of Sigmar was just far better in every facet. The units were more reliable, there was far more synergy, and they were far cheaper for what they did. Like, if you gave me the 2 previous codex of the 2 previous battletomes, like of the Cities of Sigmar and the 2.0 version of Stormcast Eternals, and said build an army using these, the army would have been mostly Cities of Sigmar, to the point where I would have questioned, lore-wise, why the hell did Sigmar bother to forge these losers? So, there's that. Then we've got Shield of Civilization. In the first and second battle rounds, if any Stormkeep Redeemer units contest an objective that is partially or wholly within your territory, each model counts as 3. This is something new that is interesting, helping you with holding objectives. It applies to Stormkeep Redeemers, so it applies to the Stormcast units, which typically don't have fantastic numbers, because typically, in the past, they've been woefully overpriced. A Redeemer, like, when I think Redeemers and I think overpriced Stormcast crap, I immediately think, yeah, Liberators should be 10 guys per model base, but they're not. And they're priced like they should be. Even though they're 10 wounds and for 5 guys with a 4-up save, rerolling 1s actually doesn't tend to go very far. Because they hit like they're wielding fluffy pillows. So, and that's just not very good. So, there's that. And this is overall very interesting. And then it's more taking and holding objectives and giving you a bit of a bonus for doing that. So, it's an interesting ability. I'm not sure of its real practical importance overall until we see the army. But in addition, if an enemy unit finishes a charge move within 1 inch of a friendly Stormkeep Redeemer that is within 6 inches of an objective you control, you roll a dice. On a 3+, that unit receives D3 mortal wounds. That's not particularly bad, because once you've taken the objective, you particularly want to hold it, and the Stormcast overall have excelled on the defense and have piss poor attack, as I just mentioned in that one example. Hopefully that changes, but if it doesn't, then this can help, I don't know, I suppose it's intended to give them a little bit more of a chance and an edge, but we'll see. Then they showed us the Staunch Defenders trait. So the Staunch Defenders we're looking at here. This has changed from what it was before. Before, this used to be a plus to your saves if you didn't move. Now with the pluses kind of being reined in a little bit, you can re-roll the dice that determines the number of mortal wounds caused to an enemy unit by a friendly Stormkeep Redeemer that uses the Shield of Civilization battle trait within, wholly within 12 inches of the general. So, average 2, maybe 3 mortal wounds if you bother to invest in this. I'm sure there's going to be something better in the Stormcast book. Like some people say that Warhammer community only ever shows us the good rules to try and sell us on the good rules. To be honest, most of the time I'm pretty convinced they actually show us all the shit rules on purpose to make us buy the new books to see what the good rules are. Like, just saying that. So, then they talk a little bit about the dragons. So, this is the first named dragon. So Kazurai the Scarred, Karazai, stupid dragon names. So he has this thing that each time he destroys a unit, he gets one of the following effects that he adds to himself for the rest of the battle. +1 attacks for all his melee weapons if he kills a hero or monster. Sure. If he killed something, if the enemy unit had a wounds characteristic of 3 or more and was not a hero monster, he gets +1 run and charge. If the enemy had a wounds characteristic of 2 or less, you can heal 1 wound allocated to this unit. Well, each time this unit destroys an enemy unit, you can apply the relevant effect below. So, provided he's constantly killing units, you can get a lot of mileage out of this, I suppose, because there doesn't seem to be any restriction right here. So long as he's killing hordes of, 2 or less wounds, basic infantry, really, things that should die pretty easily, but he probably shouldn't be charging, because he's a monster. Presumably, he shouldn't be charging hordes will still rip you to shreds. But, at least he'll heal if he kills everything in it. He probably still shouldn't charge it. His best targets are going to be the first 2. Things that have a wounds characteristic of 3 or more, which gives you the add 1 to run and charge rolls. Sure. And the +1 to your attacks. I think they've shown off his profile that we'll see in another one with his weapons. So, pretty decent, again. Interesting ideas to try and make this monster much more appealing, I guess. And that is that they've showed for this one. So on to the next article, the building all dragon armies from the Stormcast Eternals. At this point, they've shown off a few other things. And the Scales of Justice, which are these new dragon riders, which I haven't made a video on. I'm kind of annoyed that they've recycled the head design from the big guy here and just made it smaller. This kind of shits me and is very lazy on an otherwise very good model, I think. Like all Games Workshop stuff, I see something with a flying stand and big wings, and I kind of immediately recoil in horror, because I know that's going to be a pain in the ass on the tabletop. And to build. So, here they're showing some of the changes to the Stormhost. So, the Knights Excelsior Storms of Annihilation. So, their Stormhost is getting this ability. I'm not too familiar with the Knights of Excelsior. I always forget which one they are. So, once per turn at the start of the combat phase, you can pick one friendly Knights Excelsior Paladin. So, this is going to be things like the new Annihilators, Redeemers, Protectors, Devastators, Desolators, the ones with the giant axes that shred hordes. The Protectors are your anti-monster one. I know. So, there's that. And until the end of the phase, when you pick that unit to fight, pick one enemy unit within 1 inch of that unit. If the number of models in that enemy unit is greater than the number of models in the Paladin, add 1 to hit and wound rolls for attacks made by that Paladin unit. This is going to be pretty good, because unless it's Protectors taking on a monster, Stormcast are almost always going to be outnumbered, especially with the Paladin units, unless you built a big brick of Paladins, in which case that is like 90% of your army. In most cases. So, there's that to consider. But, overall, that's a pretty decent ability, especially if they up them to be slightly better in terms of their attack. But most of the Paladins are 3/3s anyway, so this gives them a good access to 2/2s, hitting and wounding. So that's more reliability on very expensive Paladin units to begin with. We'll see what their price comes out in the wash, but if you have, just about every one of them is going to benefit from this, except for the Protectors. The Annihilators are going to benefit from it. Retributors are going to be pretty good with it as well. The number one benefit of this that I can think of is the Decimators. Yeah, that's what they're called, Decimators. The ones with giant axes, who they gain an attack for every unit that's within range of their, 2-inch... 3-inch reach great axes. So, and they're designed for shredding hordes, and so the idea is that they're always outnumbered, so they will do extra good with that. So I particularly like that. Astral Templars, another one I can't remember what they actually look like. Jeez, too many of these. Friendly Astral Templar units cannot be picked when your opponent carries out a monstrous rampage. Sounds awful on paper, probably better in practice. Given the games that I've observed, currently in lockdown, so I haven't been able to actually get out and play much 3rd edition, so I'm still working on a base of all my 2.0 knowledge here. Fortunately, the game hasn't changed too much. I've only been able to talk with people who have had the opportunity to play and watch their games, unfortunately. So, from what I've seen, not being able to be picked for a monstrous rampage can be pretty good, particularly because that mostly covers things like Raw, which says no command ability for you on a 3+. When it works, and on a 3+ is pretty reliable, that's annoying. That can win games. So that's not a bad ability. Hopefully there's more to the Astral Templars, I hope. So, there is that, and then the rest of this is an ad. On to the next one, we're talking about Magic and Mayhem, so now we're talking about the Dragon Princes. These particularly 2 dragon characters, these 2 named characters here, the blue and red one. You see this Star Drake in the back here? Hopefully this becomes good, because right now, it's almost like 400 plus points of complete and utter garbage. Like, it cannot be used. It literally cannot be used. It's that bad. It's points down the drain. Anyway, onto these guys. So, each prince fights according to their personality. Kazrai has his jaws and claws, while Crondis is more measured, preferring to control because he's a wizard. They have their fire breath, so they both have the Blazing Tempest. So, range 18 inches, pretty decent range. 1 attack. Do not roll the attack sequence for an attack made with the Blazing Tempest. Instead, roll a dice. On a 1 to 2, the target suffers 1 mortal wound. On a 3 to 4, the target suffers D3 mortal wounds. On a 5 to 6, the target suffers D6 mortal wounds. So the average there is D3 mortal wounds, so your average is about 2 wounds. At least you're doing some wounds. It's not a great damage output from the breath, but it is somewhat reliable damage from the breath. It's more mortal wounds, which I'm beginning to grow quite tiresome of, but there is that. So they both have that. It's a okay-ish. Then we have Crondis, son of Dracothian. So this is the blue one, the magical one. He gets +3 to his casting rolls, which is a good little notation to make a note here. So that's very good bonuses to his casting rolls. So his spells become very reliable now. And of course, the first thing they happen to show us is one with a really high casting value, which you'll only need a 6 to cast with his +3. So there is that. So I don't know why they even bothered to put it as a casting value of 9 when it's clearly, by the looks of this, a unique spell for the character on his data sheet, and he's only ever going to cast it on 6. Like, I don't understand. There's some weird game design that goes on at Games Workshop, along with a lot of other weird ideas and decision making. But, so, casting value of 9 when cast has a range of 24 inches, as you can see. You pick an enemy unit within range, invisible to caster, and you pick one of the unit's effects. Blinding Gales is subtract 1 from hit rolls for attacks made by that unit. Pretty good. That one's good. Meteor Hail, worsen their rend by 1 to a minimum of dash, so minimum nothing. That one's very good, actually. Worsening rend has seems to be picking up more, and it's a very good mechanic. It's much more important now with the way saves are. But though typically in Age of Sigmar, it's almost a case of you either have a save or you don't in most situations, which is the way it should work. The minuses of Rend is interesting, especially with the way now that saves work with modifiers, where you can put multiple plus saves to a save modifier, but really all you're doing is lessening Rend, but you're not actually increasing your save modifier past the +1. It's a weird interaction, and this kinda is interesting. The subtract 1 from attacks characteristic of missile weapons used by that unit. It's okay. There's a lot of shooting, so this is a preemptive thing that is probably pretty good, and it's best used on things with more than one attack. Immediately bringing to my mind, most arrow units have the ability to fire something that at least has 2 shots, some sort of form of rapid fire. Caradron stuff, all the good Caradron stuff, except for their heavy weapons, is vulnerable to this in some way. Caradrons need every attack they can get because their to-hit scores are kind of shit. Or their to-wound scores are kind of shit. In fact, generally their weapons are just kind of shit. They just make up for it with huge volumes of shooting. So, this is a direct counter to them. The subtract 1 from the saves rolls for attacks that target that unit. You could... it's pretty good. So, the Worst in the Rend is a defensive one. The Lightning Vortex is a preemptive defensive one for neutering stuff. Same with Blinding Gales. The Flash Freezing Blizzard is the only one that you're going to get immediate mileage out of in that turn that you have. So the other ones are planning for your opponent's next turn. So that's something to keep in mind there. So knowing which one you use is pretty much going to depend on what you're fighting, essentially. The subtract 1 from hit rolls is going to really punish any army that isn't wielding pretty elite stuff. So anything that has their base units hitting on 4s and relying on +1s to get them hitting on 3s. Seraphon, Cities of Sigmar, some Bone Splitter Orcs, Skaven, all that. That's your counter to them. The Meteor Hail is your Worst in the Rend. That's a good counter to the Stormcast, to some undead units. Although Blinding Gale is also very good to that. The Meteor Hail for undead units is better against the Ossiarchs. Particularly good against some of the Elven factions there. The Lightning Vortex is great against certain shooting factions that rely on multitude of shots. And then you have the Flash Freezing Blizzard for when you actually want to kill them. Particularly targeting units that are just decreasing their saves in general is a good way to go. So, this one is the one you use as your staple. The other ones are your defensive ones, depending on what you're going to be fighting. They may not be useful, but this one is pretty much always going to be useful, unless you're fighting an entire army with nothing but 6+ saves, in which case, don't bother. Pick something else. Arcane Bolt, Mystic Shield. Then we have the other one. So... we've already talked about some of his abilities that we talked about in the previous one, where when he kills something, so he has this, which we've already seen, and he has his, so these bonuses do stack. That is good to know. So they confirm here that these bonuses do stack. I was not sure about that initially upon reading it, and I've read all of these a couple times now, but no, okay, so these do stack. So this is a character that can snowball, but, just shoot him down. He'll be fine. Just shoot him to death. So then he has this, his Calamitous Tail. The attack characteristic of Calamitous Tail is equal to the number of enemy models within 3 inches of the attacking. 3s and 3s, -2, 2 inches, 3 attacks. This will really help him kind of cleave through the hordes with the 2 wounds, so that's something to keep in mind. It's a pretty decent attack, actually. Particularly, pretty good against just about everything that's horde-y. Even the medium infantry that have 2 wounds, like the Stormcast, and some of the heavier infantry. It's not until you start to get to the really super heavy infantry and the monstrous infantry that this attack starts to be less effective. So that's pretty decent, and it's got a decent 3-inch range. Anything we get with a 25mm, actually anything with a 32mm base, given the size of this model, without knowing its actual size and seeing it on the tabletop, just guesstimating from what we can see here, it's going to be a pretty decent range. So, pretty good. Now, we come to these other dragons with that ridiculously dumb video. So this is basically a captain version of the Dragon Rider. This one particularly looks pretty cool. Again, I fear these flying stands. GW doesn't know how to make a good flying stand. this thing will probably break. So, this is Knight Draconis, so it's a knight, so it's a lesser character, not a lord, in terms of lore. You know, for Sigma, it doesn't matter. So, he has the ability to make dragons your battle line, particularly these Stormdrake Guard. So, these appear to be flying dragon cavalry, as opposed to your running dragon cavalry. Looks like they've got two different weapon options, which is the Lance and the Warblades. The Lance will probably have the typical Lance thing of extra damage on the charge, whereas a Blade will typically be more reliable overall. So there is always that to consider when it comes to equipping these. So there's that. They don't actually go into really much information on these whatsoever. This is just a, hey, new model, buy it. So there's not a lot to speak on, but these Dragon Riders are coming as a flying shock cavalry. So think... I'm thinking more for people familiar with Total Warhammer and Warhammer Fantasy. I'm thinking hippogriffs. I'm thinking hippogriff knights. I'm thinking good old flying Bretonnian cavalry, shock cavalry. So there is that. Now that is the roundup now for everything that has been covered for the Stormcast Eternals. Coming to Age of Sigmar. So, that is all I have for now. That is everything to cover. I've been Jay from Jade Productions, and I will see you next time. And if you have more information that I've missed from things like the Games Workshop Facebook that I might have missed, please share that as well in the comments or in the Discord. You can find links in some of the videos, including this one, I believe. And thank you again. Please take care of yourselves, everyone. Please take care of yourselves. And I will see you next time.